Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. And as we continue to roll through March, we know I did a little bit of a recording a couple weeks ago that I aired about March being National Women's History Month. But as I said, that has less influence over what I do on the podcast because every week, if you do listen on any kind of regular basis, you know that I like to feature women. That's my thing. That's the format. That's kind of the whole purpose of the podcast, to get women on here to quote unquote uncork, to share a little bit of their life story to help inspire, inform, entertain, and hopefully we have some laughs along the way and you gain some information and inspiration. So this week, and I also like to talk about how I know my guests, because as I've said many times, and you're probably sick of me saying it, I just think it's so important that we, when we're out in the community or wherever we are, when we're networking, we meet people, we connect, and we kind of just think, this person, maybe you might not think that you're going to run into them later in life, but you never know how you can help one another and how you're going to interact in the community or in business or personally, professionally. So my guest today, I believe I had met her through the Chamber Women's Luncheon. She was very active with that. And at the time I was too. So it was several years ago, but she's also very well known in northeastern Pennsylvania for her role as publisher of Happening magazine, which is a beautiful magazine. It's glossy, it's gorgeous, and it keeps us all informed of northeastern Pennsylvania's happenings and people. So let me introduce my guest for this week, Paula Rochon Mackarey. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you, Janine. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so glad that you had time to join me. And for those of those folks who are not in northeastern Pennsylvania, they may not be as familiar with Happenings magazine. You don't find this kind of magazine, this quality, really out there that much anymore, but it has been around for a long time and just gorgeous. Not just, stories, advertising, just a beautiful piece that people can look at, and it is published monthly. Do you want to tell us a little bit just about how long it's been around and when you became involved with it and how that all came about?
Certainly. Well, yes, it has been around since 1969, and it was started coincidentally by three men, Tom Reddington, Murray Dulutsky, and Jim Egan. And they were men, I wish I could remember what the history says about how old they were, but they each had careers in different businesses. Tom Reddington was an engineer. Murray Dulutsky, I think, had a fur business. He was a furrier in Scranton. And Jim Egan had many businesses having to do with sound equipment and answering machines, probably the forerunner to some of the technology today. But anyway, these three men somehow got together. They knew each other. And they said, it would be great to have a publication that brought the region together, that promoted the events in the area, some of the new outlet stores that were appearing, and something that would get people to travel, in particular from Scranton to Wilkes-Barre and vice versa, and the Poconos, etc. So that was in 1969, and these three men published it for 6 months together. And then after about 6 months, I guess the two other men really didn't want to continue in it. So Tom Reddington and his wife, Anne, they were a family, an Irish family from Clark Summit, and they had 6 children, and they published it for 25 years out of the basement of their home in Clark Summit. Prior to that, they had an office in the Hotel Casey in downtown Scranton. And so I came on board in about 1994, and Tom's wife, Anne, was ill. He was looking to pass the magazine on to someone. The children, none of the 6 children wanted it. And I would imagine that they didn't want it because they saw how hard their parents worked at it, probably how little profitable it was. And so what Tom did is he went to one of his bigger advertisers, which happened to be Carriage Barn Antiques, and said, "Hey, would you like it?" And so that's Sam, the owner, was involved with the Visitors Bureau. I was a newly graduating Marywood University student with little or no direction in my life, coming out with a communications degree. Thinking I was going to go to law school, I went on an interview and I thought, this is kind of what I've been waiting for my whole life. So that was the beginning of how I got started in 1994, a long time ago. And I have been publishing it since that day.
Wow. So what was it that, I mean, so to consider that you were actually thinking about law school, and then you have this publication, which again, it features people, it features businesses, and it really helps people understand the great value we have here in northeastern Pennsylvania. What was it that spoke to you that you said, okay, I want to do this?
Well, law was not a passion of mine at all. It was just, I think, like many students today who graduate with a 4-year degree, particularly in communications and other programs as well. Okay, now I've graduated and I'm not sure what I want to do. Why not get a graduate degree or law degree? But I think, I was a letter writer when I was a child, as many of us were. That was our the forerunner to social media. I had a lot of, my mom was Canadian, so I had a lot of cousins and family out of the area. We traveled a lot. And so I had friends from out of the area, and letter writing was really a big part of what I did in my childhood. Um, Picking out stationery and graphics and colored pens. And you may not see the connection, but I really did like to communicate with people, to send something via the U.S. mail that would excite the recipient, something that would be memorable and interesting. And then I think after that, I did like writing papers in school and college and doing projects. I loved projects, publishing newsletters. I like to present ideas in a way that would evoke a response from the recipient. And so I think that's what kind of turned me on to publishing. And also, my late father was a printer. And so I think at the time, the company that he worked for, Art Print Company, they had published it. And so I was very familiar with it. And I used to look at it. I used to read it. It was very different then. But so I was very familiar with it. And I think I instantly saw potential of what I could do with it.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. And it certainly is something that people look forward to. You talk about something that excites the reader. I mean, I know I've been looking at happenings probably since my 20s. I just think it's just a quality piece, and the gloss and looking through and the beautiful photos and reading the stories, and you get to know, people from the area, businesses from the area. So it has such great value. How has it changed for you? I know that you do still publish the actual magazine, but you also have it online as well. How has that changed for you with the digital age? I mean, I personally do love having something in my hands to feel and touch and read. But we've had some changes. Obviously, a lot of newspapers have gone out of business throughout the country. But how has it changed for you that you're still able to publish this beautiful magazine and stay in business?
Well, the digital version has certainly helped build the brand. I mean, the shareability of the article, we publish in two different ways. It's a flip through version, so you're, just like you're flipping through the print version, you can flip through the entire version of the magazine. That can be sent by email, messenger, posted on social media. So the readership has certainly enhanced. I think that the 25 years prior of establishing the brand was important. I mean, if we just started a digital brand right now, I don't know that the popularity of it would be there. So I think the combination of the previous history of it and being in the digital age and the social age that we are right now really did create the perfect storm for sharing the content. You know, I think media always has a love-hate relationship with agencies, and there's a lot of agencies that will say we cut print, as if print is the only vehicle of what we do, but really it's the content. It's the content that people had come to anticipate every month. And so whether it's delivered digitally or by print, it really isn't about, you know, the answer that we've cut print really is generally by someone who doesn't understand the passion for the content.
Yeah. And that makes sense. It doesn't, it's really about the story, about the people, about, you know, and even the beautiful photos, you could still appreciate them digitally. I know one story that resonates with me recently because of some work I'm doing with King's College about reducing stigma around opioid use is the story you had done about a gentleman, and he talked about his recovery from his addiction throughout his life. So, I mean, you're doing some amazing stories. And of course, in February, Heart Month, featuring, you know, those beautiful photos of women in red and their stories about the importance of heart health. So these are impactful stories and important information that you're getting out there. Is there anything that I mean, you've got a lot of content through the years. Anything that comes to mind almost instantly that you're super proud of, or that you love, certain things that have touched you that you were so pleased and proud to publish?
Well, I will say that we have been able to, you know, you talked about the change of the digital age, and the digital age, one negative for us is that when the magazine began in 69, the purpose really was to publish the events. And now, you know, you can find out about events in any different, any form. You can just, whatever, you know, Google any events in any area. So the purpose of happenings has changed, and we have been able to get into deeper topics and subjects, beyond just, you know, where the local fairs and festivals. And one of the topics that you just mentioned, the recovery, you know, as a business person, I have to see, well, what are the topics that are affecting the region that also can be supported by advertising. And so I did see that September was a recovery month, and I spoke to someone who I had known from high school and kind of asked if he wanted to be interviewed, and he said no, but let me think of someone. And he got back to me a few weeks later and said, you know, I have someone who's going to be perfect for this. He has been incarcerated for 25 years, and he has a great story. And as a writer, as an interviewer, I thought to myself, I've never spoken to anybody who's been incarcerated for 25 years, you know, and I do a lot of work out of my house. I was like, do I let him know where I live? You know, I've been a bit sheltered for some of my life. And I thought, you know, how do I talk to someone like this? Obviously, they've come from just a very different part of my life. And as it turns out, he's kind of a friend now, and, you know, comes to the house to pick up magazines. And we really we're all human. We're all the same. And he had an incredible journey that, as a spiritual person, I think he had to be on. You know, as a 9-year-old, he kind of committed one of his first crimes and did not have the privilege of knowing a different kind of life. But the journey that he was on led him to be such an authentic person that can help others. There's not many people that can say, listen, I've been there at the bottom. And I can tell you that it's not worth it, that there's a way out. I think that his story was incredibly powerful. It was meant to be. And years ago, we may have thought, well, that's not a happy happenings kind of story. It's not, you know, whatever, but it's life as I've seen in my career of working with happenings. It's so much more about getting to the topics that need to be talked about. So I
Yeah.
guess I would say, in a very long answer to your question, that is indeed one that I was very proud of, I guess, and genuinely felt in my heart that it was meant to be. It's funny. I often never tell people when something is going to be a cover story because I never know at the end if it is. And I definitely feel, whether it's gut or intuition, I thought, nope, this man's story needs to be the cover story.
Yeah.
So thank you for asking that question. But I
Yeah.
probably
That
could tell, I'm sorry, I probably could tell a story like that about a lot of different ones. So
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, through the years, you've done many wonderful stories, but I would say that, and I know I'm in a place now or a space now because of my work with King's College and this campaign we're doing to inform, educate, and try to help remove the stigma around, what people think about, people who've been addicted. It instantly, when I saw it, it drew me in, and I have to say, I applaud you guys for publishing, and I applaud you for doing that story. Excuse me, because it is what needs to be talked about. And we're talking about that in our campaign, that other people are talking, the people selling drugs and different people are talking. We need to be talking to people who've been affected and sharing their stories so that people understand how it happens and understand where there's help that they can go. So that was an incredibly powerful story. So kudos to you for publishing it. Honestly, I know I appreciated seeing that.
thank you.
Now you mentioned, of course, the happy. There's still a ton of happiness, and more lighthearted, I should say, things
Mhm,
that you publish
mhm.
as well. So when you think of those, is there any favorite of yours as far as something really light that you just thought was just joyful that comes to mind?
Yes, in the same year, I think it was the one prior, we did something on the lost sandwich generation, and we did kind of a spin on that because I I like to think about nutrition a lot, and I thought, boy, there are so many sandwiches in our past that, I think for our health reasons, we just think, oh, we'll just order a salad when we go out, or, we're proud to say that we have a salad all the time. I also am a person, I saw a little post this morning on Facebook about motherhood, and it said, I would die for you, but I really don't want to make your dinner. And I had all of these thoughts together, and I thought, boy, there's so many sandwiches of my childhood that just, I think, for our moms made life easier. I mean, lunch sandwiches in your lunchbox, a grilled cheese dinner. Um, and we're just taught to like cut the carbs all the time. And we have lost this sandwich generation. And so that was one of my favorites as well, because people wrote in about their favorite sandwich stories, and I still have to publish some of them. I think everybody has a sandwich story. And I think that we really not need to break our bias about sandwiches. I don't think that they're all that bad for us.
Well, I could tell you, Paula, I'm doing my part. I'm a carbaholic, sadly, so I eat all the sandwiches.
Sandwich is wonderful. I mean, it's just endless when you start thinking about them. There's just no end. You could talk for hours about them.
And that is funny because it's funny. I had this conversation not that long ago with some friends who were gathered over drinks talking about how, as you mentioned, the sandwiches that our mothers made for us and put in our lunchbox. And I was saying that when I was a kid, I didn't like the fact that my mother put butter on the bread. And I was like, oh, I didn't like it. And I don't even recall if I ever told her, but it was funny. We were talking about that because you remember as a kid, it was kind of exciting lunchtime, it was that break in the day and look forward to what was in your lunchbox, which is again, very different from how things are today. So that's a really fun and lighthearted article article. And I love, as you said, people reacted to it. Obviously, it touched something in a lot of people, a certain generation, made them think about, their childhood and being nostalgic and everything. So I think that's great when what you write can touch people and bring back memories for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just said that is the fun part.
Yeah. So let me ask you, so you've been doing this for a long time. Obviously you enjoy it. How, what do you think about, I know that you have a daughter. How did you ever think about how, as a role model? Because I'm thinking of March as National Women's History Month. Of course, as I said, I like to promote women all the time. How do you feel, and I'm not saying that your daughter wants to take over or anything, but what does she think of it? And how is she being influenced by you as a role model? Because you have a role that's pretty important. I mean, publishing this magazine that people have known and respected and enjoyed for so long.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. She sees the stress behind the scenes, and I think she has no desire to take it over. But anytime I say, or my husband says, this is affecting your health, you need to stop this, she always says, "No, mommy, no." I think that she has heard and recognized the value that it does have in the community. And I have I've tried to kind of integrate her life in it. I mean, I think when I became a mother, people probably realized and learned because, I write sometimes things that I come in contact with. And a few years ago, when my daughter was in middle school, I started really talking about relationships and being very interested in relationships, and how honestly how people first start networking on the playground, and biases that develop that start right on the playground. And I met a woman from Marywood, Sister Gail, who one of my best friends had recommended that I talk to. And she had studied relationships, particularly middle school students, for years. And so I think that my daughter's life, having an only child and watching her develop relationships and friendships, women, thinking about women role models, I think the magazine has helped her. I think that our readers also benefit by me thinking about some of the issues of relationships that, honestly, if we could figure out relationships, right, there would be world peace. There would be no Ukraine problem. There would be no playground problem. There would be no bullying. There would be no bias. And it's just a huge part of our life. And I think in studying some of that, I kind of became what I would call a little bit of a philosopher. And my daughter came home from school the other day. She's a freshman at prep, and one of the women that I had interviewed was speaking to them at an assembly. And she came home very interested in the topics. And I'm going to talk about a couple of the things that you already brought up here about Women's History Month and everything. But I just think that networking and exposing ourselves to as many people as we can, and exposing our children to as many people as we can, builds early ability in them to really to start their networking and to learn from each other, I would have to say I was a bit of a sheltered child. My parents were pretty strict, not mean strict, just what they thought was kind strict. And like I said, I never spoke to anybody who was in prison before, had a drug addiction at the time. But I think that the magazine has helped me, has helped her address some topics that really all come back to relationships, networking, talking to people, not being afraid to, to have your close circle of friends, but to welcome another one in. Like I'm so into that right now. There's always a seat at the table for another person. There just always is. And I love topics about that with women, but with all of us, honestly.
Yeah. I love what you said about networking beginning on the playground. I never really thought of it that way. That could be, I mean, honestly, talk about a topic that's very interesting to think about how that does begin on the playground. And I agree wholeheartedly what you said about exposing your kids and ourselves to things that we're not used to. That's how we learn. And
Mhm,
I think sometimes people are afraid of discomfort, where
mhm,
that's when we grow. When I
mhm,
used to do improv or even now doing stand up, you get uncomfortable, you get nervous or meeting new people. But that's usually when you find some great benefits and value, when you get through that little bit of nervousness and uncomfortable and uncertainty, and then you really have some great experience. I think that's wonderful to teach your daughter that and to teach other, even adults. It's never too late to change your mindset about that.
mhm, mhm. And I think if parents, just having gone through it, if I would have any advice to parents, it's teach your children that when they get to the playground and they get to preschool, it kind of is networking. It's, can I be the person who's remembered for being kind? Can I be the person who's remembered for reaching out and inviting someone else in the circle? Because we all know we remember the person who is that person. And I don't know that I always was brave enough to do it, but I'm teaching my daughter to be the person who's brave enough to do that.
And that's a wonderful asset, great valuable lesson. Yeah, that's wonderful. Let me ask you about something that you mentioned. I know this has nothing to do with really the happenings, but I just find it interesting. You mentioned that, is it your mom who is from Canada?
Yes. Hmm.
Interestingly enough, I know I do some standardized patient work, and I knew Melissa, who I believe married into your family.
She did.
She
She
used to,
did.
yeah,
Hmm.
she used to talk about her visits to a boyfriend in Canada, and I'm thinking, how
Hmm.
the heck did that come about? So, do you still have relatives in Canada?
Oh, yes, indeed. Indeed. Many, many, many cousins. My mom was one of 11 children. And so I have many, many first cousins in Canada. Hmm. And
Do
therefore
you?
many, mhm,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
and many friends as well.
Do you travel there a lot? I just find it's interesting to me. I mean, obviously a lot of us do have like ancestors, but to have like actual relatives in a different country, but that it's still so close that you could see them on a somewhat regular basis. Do you have travel back and forth, and do they come here to America to visit with your family?
Yes, they do. Um, and we are having a reunion on my mother's side of the family this coming July. It's about once every 10 years. So I'm very, very much looking forward to that. Obviously, travel has been curtailed so much in the past several years. Um, but my daughter has been there, I think, 2 or 3 times. We have to make sure her passport is renewed. But it was nice to be. Now we were really all in Eastern Canada, so more Ontario and Quebec. But with my husband, I've been to Vancouver and really fallen in love with that as well. But my family is more Ontario and Quebec.
I just think it's so, for me, I'm fascinated by, because I'm meeting Melissa and having worked with her and having her like move there. I'm just like, gosh, how do you do that as an American, And I remember her talking about some of the things she had to do, like forms she had to fill out to work there. And I'm like, it fascinates me to be able to do that, to go move to another country and, assimilate to that country and work there and everything. So I was always interested that she did that, and impressed that she was able to, leave the country, leave her family, and
Mhm,
go start this new life. I think it's pretty cool.
mhm. I think
That's
she can do a podcast on how you do it, because she certainly learned a lot and she wants to help other people.
Yeah, now you've given me an idea because I know I am really intrigued about that. I think that's pretty cool. Well, that's great. So before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to share, whether it's about your life in publishing with happenings or about the region, anything that you're especially proud of, excited about, hopeful for, any closing words from you?
Oh, well, I really thank you for inviting me to do this. It's funny, I haven't been asked to speak or participate in something like this for a while, and that's fine. I'm now, I think, one of the older people in the business in the region, having done this for so long. I remember, being the younger one, and everybody used to say, "Wait, you're the publisher? Like, how old are you?" So, thank you for this opportunity. I feel like I'm an elder at this point. Um, but no, it's a privilege to publish this. It's a responsibility that I take seriously. I want it to be a positive part in people's lives, and I want to, encourage the region to make the people of the region to make it the best that we can. I love when sometimes cities. I remember my late brother-in-law used to say, when a city has a campaign like Montreal, I think maybe they had the cleanest subway for a while. And I said, it'd be neat if we had make this the friendliest region that we can, and everybody has to buy into that. I love investing my time and energy into the region. It is my home, and it's my daughter's home, and I want it to be something that she's proud of. So I've enjoyed this opportunity.
Well, thank you so much, and I can't say enough about that as well. Have always been. I'm born and raised in Scranton, and I've always been a fan, always been an advocate. While we do have obviously things to improve, we have wonderful people in the region, not just here in Scranton, but throughout northeastern Pennsylvania. We have wonderful artists, business people, entrepreneurs, so much innovation happening that hopefully people will. Sometimes our eyes are closed to these things. Hopefully they'll open their eyes and take your words of advice even to what you say to your daughter. Step outside your comfort zone, connect with people that maybe you don't normally, learn something that maybe you didn't know about the region, and help support it. And I am all for the friendliness. We could certainly use that, especially these days. Let's find more of what brings us together than divides us. I think that's important. Let
Absolutely.
I
Mhm.
do want to thank you again so much for. I know that publishing is busy. I'm sure the stress your daughter sees, I can understand with deadlines how real that is. So again, I do appreciate you making the time to be with me today, and for our listeners to learn from you. And I will include in the show notes. I will include, if I can, a link to happening so that people who aren't from the region, who may not be familiar, can check it out, because I think that you should all see it. Take a look at it. It's beautiful, a magazine, great stories, learn about people and businesses here in northeastern Pennsylvania that we're proud of. So thank you again for your time. And as I like to say to my listeners every week, I do really value, if you've enjoyed the podcast, please remember to subscribe to it, share it with someone who might gain some value from it. And as I always say, I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass.